Have you ever felt this bizarre, almost unexplainable disconnect between what you genuinely want to do and what you're actually doing?
Oh, like you're just sitting in the passenger seat of your own life.
Yes, exactly. Just watching yourself operate on autopilot, like you
Yep.
want to speak up, you want to, make a change or set a boundary, but instead you just go through the motions. You live out someone else's script.
It is a deeply unsettling feeling, that sense of being a spectator in your own mind. And we routinely misdiagnose it, all the time.
Right.
We look at that internal paralysis and we think, I'm just tired, or I guess I'm just a naturally passive person. We basically internalize it as a character flaw.
We absolutely blame ourselves. But today, for all of you joining us, our resident learners, we are jumping into a deep dive that completely flips that script.
It really does.
We are unpacking the profound psychology of controlling parents, or, as popular culture often calls them, toxic
Yeah,
parents.
that's the buzzword.
Right. But the mission today isn't just to talk about the damage. We are going to explore the actual structural mechanics of how a controlling person literally tries to live inside another person's mind.
Which is a heavy concept, but so important.
It is. We're going to figure out why this dynamic leaves us feeling mentally paralyzed well into adulthood, and most importantly, look at the specific, actionable strategies we can use to reclaim our mental real estate.
And, taking a structural approach is really what makes this exploration so valuable. It moves us away from just lingering on the pain of the
Yeah,
experience.
because that can just feel overwhelming.
Exactly. By deconstructing the hidden architecture of the controller's behavior, like the actual why and how behind their actions, we can take what usually feels like this massive, confusing emotional burden and turn it into a clear, solvable problem.
Well, let's figure out what that architecture actually looks like. Because before we even look at the external cause, the controlling parent, we really need to examine the internal symptom.
Right, what the person is actually experiencing.
The thing you, listening right now, might actually be feeling day to day, that profound sense of mental and physical exhaustion. The psychological framework we're looking at today introduces this concept called splitting.
And we should probably clarify the terminology right away, because
Yep.
splitting has a very specific meaning in clinical psychology.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, usually a clinician uses that term to describe black and white thinking. It's a defense mechanism that's often associated with um, borderline personality disorder.
Right, right.
But that is not what we're talking about here. The kind of splitting we are dissecting today is a severe form of dissociation. It is a massive gaping chasm that basically forms between a person's true desires and their actual actions.
So psychologically, what is actually happening in the brain when that chasm forms? Like, how do we become so disconnected from our own desires?
It happens when you're forced, usually over a period of years, to constantly ignore that quiet internal voice that says, I don't want to do this.
What?
You might feel a deep aversion to an expectation placed on you, but you force yourself to proceed anyway because your environment, specifically your parent, demands it.
You just push it down.
Exactly. And when you suppress your own will for long enough, your mind and your body literally begin to drift apart. The alignment between what you feel and what you do just shatters.
And the long-term result of that isn't just that you feel a little stressed out, right? It becomes this profound, heavy sense of apathy.
Yes, total apathy.
Your heart just stops being moved by anything. You wake up, you go to work, you interact with people, but there's no spark. It's just like brain fog and heavy limbs.
And we live in a society that loves to label people who can't get out of bed or can't muster enthusiasm as lazy.
Oh, totally. We're obsessed with productivity.
Right. But this apathy is not laziness. That is a crucial realization from our source material. When you look at the mechanics of splitting, this apathy is actually a brilliant psychological survival mechanism.
Wait, really? A survival mechanism?
Absolutely. Your mind is literally shutting down its higher functions to protect itself. After a lifetime of suppressing its true voice to survive a hostile emotional environment, the brain just, pulls the plug.
I was actually thinking about this, and the best way I can describe it is it's exactly like a smartphone.
Okay, I like that.
Think about what happens when you leave your phone out in the hot sun or it's running way too many heavy apps and it starts overheating. What does the device do?
It usually shuts down.
Right. It shuts down all the background apps. It dims the screen so much you can barely see it. It might even just freeze completely. And if you look at that phone, you don't say, wow, what a lazy phone.
No, of course not.
You don't think it's fundamentally broken. You understand that it is executing a defense mechanism to stop the whole motherboard from melting down.
The dimming of the screen captures that feeling of apathy perfectly. And framing it this way completely shifts the blame.
How so?
Well, instead of beating yourself up for having no energy or no drive, you can stop looking at yourself as a defective device. You can start examining the intense emotional heat that forced your system to shut down in the first place. You are operating exactly as you were programmed to operate under extreme duress.
Okay, but if the phone is overheating, we have to look at what's generating the heat.
Exactly.
If this splitting is a defense mechanism against a toxic environment, who built that environment and why? Let's look at the psychology of the controlling parent. I think there's a tendency to view these people as, I don't know, cinematic villains,
Right.
maybe sitting in an armchair, rubbing their hands together, plotting to destroy their child's self-esteem.
Yeah, the evil mastermind trope. But the reality is much more tragic than that. Controlling parents are often people who fail to achieve their own independence or autonomy.
Oh, wow. So it comes from their own lack.
Precisely. Think about the generational or societal constraints they might have faced. Economic hardship, strict gender roles, or even their own traumatic family dynamics that force them to put their desires on hold. Because they failed to achieve their own self-actualization, they're left with this profound, painful emptiness inside. A void.
And a void naturally demands to be filled.
Right. They look for a solution to that emptiness.
Yeah.
And they find it in something they can control. Children are incredibly vulnerable. They're dependent. They have no real structural power, and they can't easily fight back or walk away.
So they become the target.
Yes. So the parent uses the child as a surrogate. They essentially try to relive their unfulfilled life through the child. The dynamic is less about breaking the child's spirit and more about the controller wanting to literally live inside the child's mind.
I'm struggling with this living in the mind idea, though. Are we saying these parents are fully aware of what they're doing? Is it a calculated attack, or do they genuinely think they are just being good, protective parents?
Consciously. The parent almost always believes it is love. Yeah, they tell themselves they're guiding, protecting, and nurturing their child. It's a very effective self-deception. But the true parasitic nature of this dynamic is forced out into the open when the child naturally starts to grow up.
Right, because growing up inherently means creating distance.
It is biologically and psychologically necessary for a child to start forming their own opinions, creating physical and emotional space, establishing boundaries. I mean, it's the core task of adolescence.
Sure, everybody goes through it.
But when the child begins this totally normal process of individuation, the controlling parent doesn't see a young adult successfully maturing. They see themselves losing their home.
Because they've been living inside the child's mind.
Exactly. The child's independence feels like an eviction notice.
And that triggers a panic response.
Massive panic. To acknowledge the child's independence as healthy would mean the parent has to finally turn around and face their own void. They'd have to look in the mirror and deal with their own unfulfilled life. To avoid that terrifying prospect, they have to stop the eviction.
But how do you do that? How do you make a perfectly healthy, functioning person think they are sick or broken just for wanting some space?
Well, you have to pathologize their independence.
Pathologize it.
Yeah. The parent starts labeling the child's completely healthy desire for autonomy as problematic behavior or just a phase or even a form of mental sickness. They'll say, if you want to make your own choices, you're not growing up, you're being rebellious, you're acting crazy, you're breaking the family apart.
Wow, that is incredibly manipulative.
It is. By labeling natural growth as a sickness, the parent justifies doubling down on the control. They convince themselves, and eventually the child, that the control is actually a necessary cure for this sudden problematic behavior.
That brings up a terrifying question. The parent is dealing with a teenager or a young adult who has eyes and ears. How does the parent successfully execute this? We're talking about specific, almost hypnotic verbal tactics used to maintain this illusion over the course of decades, right? It starts with completely redefining the concept of a good child.
The linguistic manipulation is insidious because it sounds so positive on the surface. A parent will sigh and say things like, "You used to be so cute," or "You were always such a good child."
Let's translate that. When a controlling parent says good, what they're really communicating is, you were good when you obeyed me without question, when you didn't make a fuss, and when you didn't have your own opinions.
Now think about the psychological implications of that for a developing brain. That redefinition forces the child to associate self-erasure with love and approval.
God, that's heavy.
If good means silent and compliant, then having a voice, having a preference, or setting a boundary inherently means you are bad. You feel fundamentally unlovable the moment you advocate for yourself.
And if that subtle linguistic trap doesn't work, there's a much more aggressive tactic at play here that the source outlines. The literal rewriting of reality.
Gaslighting in its purest form.
Yeah.
When a child tries to bring up past hurt or tries to assert their own memory of a painful event, the controlling parent immediately deflects. They use phrases like, "you're remembering it wrong," or "you're just overly sensitive," or my personal favorite, "that never happened."
I was trying to picture what this actually feels like over a 15-year period.
Hmm.
Imagine you're working on a Google Doc. You're typing out your memories, your experiences, your feelings. It's your document.
Right.
But someone else has secret access to it, and they are just stealthily hitting undo on all your typing. Every time you write a sentence about how a comment hurt your feelings, they hit undo and say, nope, you didn't write that. You must be seeing things.
That is a perfect analogy.
Doing that once or twice is frustrating, but if someone does that to you every day for your entire childhood, you don't just get mad. Eventually, you just take your hands off the keyboard entirely. You stop trusting your own eyes.
And that systematic denial of reality is what breaks a person down. It isn't just a disagreement over historical facts. By constantly overriding the child's memory, by hitting undo over and over, the child eventually stops trusting their own senses.
They just give up.
They internalize the label the parent has given them. They start to believe, maybe I really am the broken one. Maybe my memory is faulty. Maybe my feelings are completely irrational. They relinquish the keyboard.
They dim the screen. They shut down the background apps. The psychological splitting we talked about at the beginning is complete. The parent has successfully secured their residence in the child's mind, and the child is left feeling apathetic, exhausted, and completely untethered from their own reality.
The cycle is closed.
It's incredibly heavy to sit with that realization, but we promised at the start that we wouldn't just leave you in the wreckage.
We did promise that.
Now that we've exposed the deeply ingrained mechanics of this mental invasion, the void, the hypnotic language, the rewriting of reality, how do you actually get out? How do you serve that eviction notice and stop the splitting? There's a very practical, almost shockingly straightforward solution to start this process. Write down the conversations.
Transcribing the interactions.
Yeah.
It is one of the most powerful tools for breaking hypnotic control.
So you mean literally taking a pen and paper after a phone call or an argument and writing down exactly what was said, word for word?
Exactly. By physically writing down what the parent says, the hidden structure of the manipulation suddenly becomes visible. You stop reacting to the tone or the guilt tripping, and you just look at the raw data.
Wow.
You can literally see on the page how they might swap material support for emotional neglect.
Oh, like when they say, I put a roof over your head and fed you, how can you say I don't care about you?
Yes, that classic line.
When that hangs in the air during a shouting match, you just feel an overwhelming wave of guilt. But when you write it down on a piece of paper, you can read it back and realize, wait, providing basic food and shelter doesn't legally negate the fact that you belittled my emotions.
Right. And writing it down forces a neurological shift. When you are in a verbal argument with a parent, your amygdala is hijacked. You are flooded with history, guilt, adrenaline. You're in pure fight or flight mode.
You can't think straight at all.
But when you sit down and look at a transcript, you are engaging the prefrontal cortex, the analytical part of your brain. It allows you to view the manipulation objectively. It separates the actual facts from the emotional labels the parent has tried to force upon you. You can see mathematically how they take a totally valid complaint from you and label it as you just making a fuss.
It's like seeing the code of the matrix. You stop seeing the emotional trap and just see the structure of the software.
That's exactly what it feels like.
But once you see that code, you have to do something with it. The next step is about establishing boundaries. Specifically, this concept from the source called separating life tasks.
And this connects directly back to what we discussed earlier about the parent's void. The listener must realize that the parent's emptiness, their failure to achieve their own independence or deal with their own trauma, is the parent's unfulfilled life task.
It belongs to them.
Yes, it is a tragedy, without a doubt, but it is their tragedy. It is not a burden the child can or should carry for them.
Think about how incredibly liberating it must be for someone listening right now to fully internalize that. Your apathy, your self-doubt, your feeling of being on autopilot. None of those are innate flaws. You weren't born broken and you aren't intrinsically lazy. Those were heavy, suffocating burdens placed on you by someone else who couldn't carry their own weight.
Your feelings of being lost, disconnected, or apathetic are not evidence of your weakness. They're evidence of the incredible monumental lengths your mind went to survive in an environment that did not allow you to have a voice.
That's so powerful.
Reclaiming your emotions and your memories is a gradual process. It takes time to rebuild trust in your own perception. But it definitively starts with recognizing that the structure you are forced to live in, not you, is what is broken. You are simply untangling yourself from someone else's unfulfilled life.
The phone dimmed its screen to survive the heat, and now you get to take it out of the sun.
Beautifully said.
Let's just take a quick second to recap the journey we went on today in this deep dive. We started by reframing apathy not as laziness, but as a protective psychological split. We uncovered the tragic reality of the empty parent who uses a child as a surrogate to avoid facing their own unlived life.
Which leads to all the manipulation.
Right, we broke down the hypnotic manipulation of memories, the redefining of good to mean silent, and the constant gaslighting. And finally, we looked at the tangible power of transcribing their words to strip away the emotion and draw a hard structural boundary.
And to you listening, whether you are dealing directly with a controlling parent, or you're just trying to understand the broader dynamics of autonomy and controlling your own life, recognizing these patterns gives you a powerful tool. You get to protect your mental real estate. You are the only one who gets to decide who lives inside your mind.
That is the ultimate takeaway, and it actually leaves me with a final thought to chew on. We talked about this amazing tool of transcribing conversations to catch a parent's control tactics, but what if we applied this same exercise to our own lives right now, across the board?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Right. How might writing down our daily interactions reveal the subtle ways we are currently silencing ourselves? Maybe you are doing it to appease a demanding boss at work who constantly shifts the goalposts. Or maybe you're doing it to keep the peace in a modern friendship that feels just a little too one-sided. Are there places in your life right now where you are still unconsciously playing the role of the good child? Where are you letting someone else hit undo on your reality?
That's a great question to leave on.
That is something for you to explore this week. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep learning, and most importantly, keep reclaiming your own voice. Because it's time to take your hands off autopilot, get back in the driver's seat, and start writing your own script. Catch you next time.